Welcome to the Inside EcoDevo podcast, where we highlight economic development happening in the state of Missouri. I'm your host, Eric Thurman, with the Missouri Department of Economic Development. We are concluding our coverage of the recent National Security Crossroads event. In this episode, you're going to hear insight into the current and future trends of the regional and national defense economy. Panelists include Eric Wollerman, president of Honeywell Federal Manufacturing and Technologies, Randell Gelzer Jr., Senior Director of State and Local Government Operations for the Central and Southwest region of the Boeing Company, and Randy Moore with AEsir Technologies. The moderator for this discussion is Sal Nodjomian with the Matrix Design Group. Let's listen in.
So this is the Defense Industry Panel, and we're going to jump right in with Eric Wollerman, who's with the Kansas City National Security Campus, Honeywell Federal Manufacturing and Technologies. You got a lot going on in your portfolio. Maybe spend a couple minutes explaining that to maybe everyone who doesn't understand, and then I'd love for you to start tying together some of the themes that we have spent the last 5 or 6 hours exploring.
Sure, happy to share. So Eric Wollerman, will be hitting 20 years with Honeywell this year. So I've been in Kansas City here the last 5 years, leading an LLC called Honeywell Federal Manufacturing and Technologies that manages the contract under the National Nuclear Security Administration, Department of Energy, for producing non-nuclear components for our nation's stockpile. So some of you may think of Honeywell, especially in this region. Honeywell has an aerospace facility in Olathe, Kansas, so that's roughly about 300 or 400 people that produces commercial avionics suite electronics components for primarily business jets and commercial jets. We are not the Honeywell Olathe facility. We are in southeast Kansas City, just south of Grandview, which is the birthplace of Harry Truman. Grandview, and we've been just north of Grandview at the Bannister Federal Complex, started in 1949. And so the mission we're serving for our nation and our allies, we're hit our 76th anniversary on Valentine's Day, kind of an interesting day to have an anniversary. But we have close to 7,000 employees, and they sit in Kansas and Missouri. And we have about 4,000 or 400 that are based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have some operations that we support with Sandia National Labs and Kirtland Air Force Base down there. So primarily all of our folks are here in this national security corridor. To tie back a little bit into some of today, so Mark Alford, mentioned we had 5,600. I think that came from the website that was updated a few years ago. Maybe 4 years ago, and so we've grown up to 7,000. We mentioned about Honeywell, Honeywell FMNT, or just our role we've had in this national security mission, and it's tied to the National Security Crossroads. Our strategy team back in 2017 had been working a lot in the community. We had roughly 3,000 people then, and we saw that we needed to grow. And we couldn't hire, we couldn't find the people we needed, and we had a national security mission to serve. And we're looking for who are our partners. And that's everybody in this room, and then some. But there wasn't an organization like this that existed when we had a national need to serve. And so we were trying to see who we can partner with. We have many existing relationships in the community, still having them today, but an organization like this that's kind of a central point that could partner when the nation called on us or there was a need. So, we still haven't let go of that need, but we've gone many ways. We managed to hire the 7,000 people. We delivered 340,000 components last year. In 2017, we were supporting 2 weapons programs, one in development, one in production, and we're currently supporting 8, 7 or 8, depending on how you look at it. So we've had a growing mission. We've had an enduring mission. If you're familiar with our nation's nuclear deterrent and our nuclear stockpile, like many things in the defense arena, we've kind of tampered down on supporting that and sustaining that. And then we've realized, oh boy, we woke up and people have been moving faster than we have. And we have a lot of, whether the word earlier was reestablish, but rethink how do we support this national security role that we all play. the nuclear arena, the nuclear deterrent underpins our national defense, and we play that vital role here in Kansas City, and we're very proud of it. When we look at our community relationships, so they extend in many places, so we're partnered with many of the organizations here. I'll mention a few when we look at STEM and in our community, so pipelining. How do you build talent? How do you build your future talent? We use STEM with 2 M's, the second M being manufacturing. And we've been partnering in the community here with KC STEM Alliance, Prep KC, but we also sit in Grandview schools, and we also have a lot of employees that are involved in many boards. But we help develop the Advanced Manufacturing Laboratory at Grandview Schools, help with machining, technical trade, welding that pipelines into Metropolitan Community College. First Robotics, big partners, we sponsor and help lead many training programs and teams, so we can bring STEM at that K through 8 level, which really doesn't get invested in much, and that's where a lot of decisions are made to focus in those careers, not giving up on what we do in high schools as well. When you look at the community, UMKC has been a partner, many of the universities. We have relationships, whether it's our plant-directed research and development opportunities, whether it's just recruiting. But ultimately, when we had to hire roles and go out of the state for them, it's almost embarrassing. You talk about how many roles are here. Programs like the ESGR, Employee Support of the Guard and Reserve, we have many employees in the Guard, some deployed. We've been able to support that. 13% of our workforce are veterans. Hiring lately, about 18% have been veterans. We've been part of the Hiring Our Heroes program. I forget the name of the other one, but both of, yep, SkillBridge, thank you. But both those programs trying to make that transition, and it's been great because you can still serve in a civil role, that same mission and pride that you have. Unique, since we are a contract in a management and operating contractor, we do have contractual requirements that, one, it's a nuclear deterrent, so we do use domestic supply base, but we also have a small business requirement for 55% of our spend to be in small businesses. So to be a small business and work, to FAR and DEAR clauses in our arena and DOD, not everybody can do that or has the infrastructure to do that. We have a very large team that helps support finding vendors, capabilities. We partner very closely here at the Kansas City Chamber on all the small businesses in this region, whether they're able to do work for us or just, what can we do to help? Because we count on $418 million of small business spend domestically here, and the more we can do in region, we will, and we will explore. So we purchase a lot of components. We're inspecting, I think we inspected 6.8 million components that we bought from a supply base. We then turned those into about 340,000 components. So, and I won't say the classified numbers of what are in a weapon system, but it's not in the thousands or hundreds of thousands of weapon systems, typically in the hundreds. So we provide a lot of components for our deterrent and really need the partners and a supply base and a resilient supply base and people that can do cleared work, cleared jobs, and have a pipeline, because I think everyone here wants an enduring nuclear deterrent, and we want to make sure that we can do that.
First of all, thank you. There's a lot rolled into that we'll probably do some unpacking maybe in the Q&A part. I want to thank you specifically for hitting K through 8 STEM. I know we tried to extract it on some earlier panels and the importance of getting to that age group, because to your point, if you miss that, you may not get them. And it takes patience to invest in something that you're not going to see the benefit from for maybe 10 years. And I applaud you guys and the others that are doing that. A direct question for you. When Dr. Caruso was up here earlier, he talked about the reshoring of critical materials. What does that mean to you specifically? And what are you guys doing to help support that initiative?
I would say nothing directly. Maybe we're fortunate that it takes a long time to deliver a nuclear weapon program, and not many of the materials we use are different than the previous ones. And so we try to have those what we need to build, the systems we're going to build in the future. We have all the electronic components that we need. What we do look for is what's the future. And I think when you look at what is being brought back stateside and the capabilities, we want to understand that. Would we need something directly? No, but having more domestic opportunities, maybe for some of even our longer lead time items or raw materials. When we're looking at future systems, we're exploring them with the national laboratories. The first thing you need is material. And we want to know, is it any different than what we've been using today? And then you got to go, what do you want to make? And what manufacturing processes do you need? How do you inspect it, certify it, et cetera? And so we know there's critical materials. There's very unique materials in our systems. And as that evolves through time, that's something that we're very keen on with our strategic sourcing teams and our advanced and exploratory development teams on trying to understand, how we can ensure that, the decisions or the outcomes maybe actually benefit, or if there's anything we can add that we're adding into the right communities.
Appreciate the extra elaboration on that. Okay, moving down the row here, we got Randell Gelzer. Randell's the Senior Director of State and Local Government Operations for Central and Southwest Region. That includes quite a number of states, if I'm not mistaken. So over to you, sir.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, and you're going to hear a lot of similar themes from me. First off, again, I want to say thank you, like many others did today, about being here. I think this is a great effort, and excited to see where it's going to go. So again, I'm Randell Gelzer. I'm also my 20th year, so happy anniversary. At Boeing, I've done a lot of jobs. I'm government ops right now, but I've done program management, been in production, sales and marketing. So I've seen a lot of the company, excited about where things are going for the future. I thought the best thing to do, I just wanted to kind of level set. First off, we have a very large presence in Missouri and soon to be in Kansas. We're very excited. When it was mentioned earlier today by Alan Cobb that, the Boeing announced last summer there were plans to acquire Spirit. That deal is expected to close this summer. So that will be 13,000 additional members of the Boeing family that we're looking forward to being back in Wichita, and I was excited to hear about Wichita State and everything they're doing. I know we've been involved with Wichita State for a long time from an R&D perspective, but then also about from a training standpoint. That's in progress in Kansas, and then in St. Louis, we're about 16,000 employees in St. Louis. It's our second largest Boeing manufacturing site, next only behind Seattle. A lot of folks don't realize that there's only 2 fighter production lines in the U.S., and one's in St. Louis, the other is Fort Worth, Texas. So we are actually building 4 products right now, primarily in St. Louis. First is the F-15EX, which is the newest F-15 for the Air Force. We last delivered 2001 to the Air Force, so we're excited to be delivering the EX model, stronger wings, bigger engines, carries lots of payload to the fight. We're really excited. We had a group of a staff delegation out yesterday, and EX-9 took off as we were touring, and so it's just really an exciting time in St. Louis for that. F-18 Super Hornet, on the other hand, that production is coming to an end, sadly. 2027, the last F-18 will come off the line. But the good news is the Navy's going to continue to send fighters back to St. Louis for service life modifications, Block 3, so we'll ship those out new after 12 months. So we'll be doing that for a while. And then the 2 newest members in St. Louis to the production line, the T-7A trainer for the Air Force, train all the next generation pilots. We're going to start low-rate initial production here this summer. First 7 have been delivered. And the MQ-25 Stingray, which is an unmanned refueler. So this is it's a large unmanned drone, flies off the carrier deck, and we just moved the first one out to St. Clair, Illinois. That's only 40 minutes from St. Louis. But that's going to be the final assembly for MQ-25. So a lot going on, and I'm not even touching on the services business, and Phantom Works is also located in St. Louis, so that is think of that as our R&D arm for defense. So MQ-25 and T-7, those products were born in Phantom Works before they were revealed to the public as we were competing for those. A lot of great talent. A lot of our classified work gets done in St. Louis. So big need from a workforce standpoint there. Switching gears to St. Charles, Missouri. So that's not far from the St. Louis campus, but that is our weapons facility, precision engagements there. Harry mentioned that at the start of the day. We delivered over 500,000 joint direct attack munitions, small diameter bombs, and harpoon missiles. So we always say, the tip of the spear a lot of times is that JDAM. It's getting used a lot today to ensure, as Congressman Alford said, about protecting our freedom. So that really is truly a national asset sitting there in St. Charles, Missouri. A lot of great work that those employees do. From a product standpoint, you can see it's a diverse line of products in St. Louis today, but that doesn't include, we also are in the process of expanding. We started construction in January on a $1.8 billion expansion. So think of this as advanced manufacturing space for future programs that we are pursuing. And it's about 150 acres, 1.5 million square feet of production space. Things are moving fast. So if you're at north of Lambert anytime, you're flying in and out of Lambert, you'll see that construction going on. So I'm gonna jump forward to just kind of tying into briefly some of the things here that I heard throughout the day, and there was a lot of alignment. I'll start with workforce. And we mentioned about the importance of getting earlier into the schools. We've seen a similar need, obviously. How do we do that more? One of the things we've started doing is trying to concentrate our funding into certain school districts. So we've focused in 3 school districts near our, what I would say, the St. Louis campus: Ferguson, Florissant, Riverview Gardens, and East St. Louis. Gave $3 million there, $1 million each. We used to spread it a lot more. We felt like that was being too dispersed and not seen, so we're trying to go in, reinforce with funding and with volunteers. So where do we send our volunteers to teach STEM? And then try to do that for a shorter amount of time, see if what kind of results you're getting. And then, so it is definitely, we've only started that. I think we're in our 3rd year now. So we will see how that trend goes. We have a great partnership with St. Louis Community College. We typically hire out of this program for assembly mechanics and composite specialists. So 2 distinct training skills. And I know Wichita State Tech sounds like they have a very similar program, which I was not aware of till today, which is a great benefit of today. But similar thing, you graduate, you get an interview, and you get, when you're drilling and riveting, you want to make sure you get a quality employee on site. But we're in the process now of expanding that training to include hydraulics and electrical, because we have a new need with that next generation T7 and MQ. And the last thing I'll touch on is veterans, from veterans tie-ins. And I'll say, I've been going to impact meetings for a few years now with Harry and with Joe. Just if we see the same connectivity in this effort between the 2 states, it's going to be a multiplier effect for all of us, because I've seen it within going to impact. I'll go to the meetings and talking to Dorsey or whoever, if it's something that, going back to Boeing St. Louis and saying to HR, hey, you need to talk to this person, because this is the person to talk to about if we're going to try to recruit out of Leonard Wood or to Whiteman or to Scott Air Force Base. I know that's not a part of the equation today, but that is another powerhouse in this crossroads we should think about. But veterans are a big part of our workforce as well. 15% of our workforce, we obviously hire out of that. Strong effort to also support veterans in that transition to their next careers.
I'm into the STEM thing, so I'm going to ask you another question on that one, and I'm afraid I know the answer. That's a big investment, $3 million, putting into different programs, and it sounds like it's relatively new. Mm-hmm. How are you going to measure success? How is success measured in that program?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things we're trying to see is improvements on reading and math scores. Are you seeing improvements in the schools? These are underserved school districts, and sometimes we're trying to see if we can see that in the data, but then also too, it's just kind of the softer results of sometimes these are school districts 2 miles from our campus and they don't even know what Boeing is.
Right.
These are kids growing up that don't even know what it means to, if I want to be an engineer, or do I want to be in supply chain? What does that mean? Or do I want to, what does it look like in the factory? We're trying to open it up some to get some of the groups through now too. Another thing we've started is a maker space at the site. to try to get kids into, either we take the equipment there, bring them in. So there's two things. One is the actual, how are they doing performance-wise in the schools from an academic standpoint, but then also what's the number? It's almost like a number of kids coming through.
Yeah, level of interest.
Level of interest and a level of engagements on tours.
Okay.
We're also trying to communicate to the guidance counselors and the teachers,
Right.
so that they can explain it to us. So it's,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad to know you've got some kind of metrics in place and you look forward to it. I've seen great programs, and a lot of times it's hard to say, I put the money in here. It takes 15 years to come out of the pipipeline on the back end as an engineer. So how do I measure those steps along the way?
Right.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. All right, so our final speaker, not just of the panel, but of the day, we'll do some wrap up here at the end, is Randy Moore. Randy's the president of AEsir Technologies, and you can explain that the way you did to me as well, because I was curious on the spelling and what that meant. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, I'm Randy Moore, and I want to start off by saying thank you for the venue, and thanks to Mike Du Bois for volunteering me for this. And and I wondered about this. When I was told I was going to be on the stage with Honeywell and with Boeing, I thought, okay, I did a little research, and last year all of Honeywell had 102,000 employees, and all of Boeing had 170,000 employees, and we've been going through a real hiring spree over the last couple of weeks because we picked up some new contracts, and we're up to about 60 people now. So
It's about the same. Same challenge.
yeah. So AEsir, the word AEsir comes from the Norse pantheon. It's Odin and Thor and Loki and so forth. And people ask us why we named the company that, and we make nickel zinc batteries. And nickel zinc batteries, it's an old chemistry, but it's relatively new because material science caught up with some of the problems that Thomas Edison discovered when he had first invented the battery. But anyway, why did we name the company AEsir? Because it's like the Norse gods. They're very powerful and they last a long time. So almost immortal. So that's why we named the company that. So, it's funny that we only have 60 people, but if you look at large companies across the U.S. and look at how many people they employ, and they define large company by over 1,000, and that's about 23% of the workforce. And if you look at small companies, which they define as under 100, that's 46% of the workforce. So it is important, I think, that I'm glad I can be here and kind of speak for the small business community. My background, I did 27 years in the Air Force, and then when I got out of the Air Force, I've been doing aerospace and defense manufacturing for my whole career. Boeing's been one of my main customers all along. And so 15 years ago, I went to Joplin, Missouri, and I took over as the president of AEsir Technologies, which is one of the suppliers of specialty batteries for things like Harpoon and JDAM and other missile systems and satellites and medical implantable devices and so forth. But AEsir Technologies in 2015 was acquired by a company who wanted to move the company in a slightly different direction, and I left, and I came over to AEsir to help move the nickel zinc battery out of development and into commercialization. And so since then, we built this pilot factory in Joplin 8 years ago, and we shipped our first batteries to NAVSEA Crane out of that factory. And the purpose of those batteries were to test them for nuclear submarines. And those tests went really well. After 4.5 years of testing, they simulated 11 years at sea, and that was good enough that we're now a program of record, so to speak, and the Navy is funding an expansion in Joplin so that we can get up to basically a submarine, about 8 submarines a year eventually is where we'll be. Along the way, we picked up a contract with the Air Force to do Minuteman III silo backup systems, and the Army, we just delivered our second contract for 6T batteries for the Abrams tank. Now, you wonder, these nickel zinc batteries, why do people want that instead of lithium ion, which is all the rage? Everybody wants lithium ion. Well, the Navy started it off by having a lithium ion battery fire in an experimental submarine in 2006. And because of that, they decided they didn't want to put lithium ion batteries underwater. I asked the Air Force, what about airplanes? And they said, well, that's why they have ejection seats. So, but similarly, the Army is looking at nickel zinc because mostly logistics. If you're familiar with lead acid batteries and lithium ion batteries, they have to be maintained. Our batteries can sit on the shelf for a long, long time and then be taken off the shelf and charged up. Also, we've moved from, a nuclear submarine looks a lot like a data center from the perspective of the battery. The battery, the submarine operates off the reactor and a steam generator, and only when those systems have to be taken offline do the batteries propel the submarine and all of the mission equipment. Well, a data center operates off of the grid, and only if the grid comes down or something happens to the transformer or the switching systems, then the batteries take over. So about 5 years ago, we put our batteries in a data center, and the LexisNexis data center in Atlanta has been running on our batteries for 5 years. So that's a little bit about AEsir. I'll switch over and talk about the defense ecosystem and about this conference a little bit. So Michael Gunn sent me 4 questions, and I learned when I went to junior high school in Knob Noster, Missouri. Yeah, that you need to listen to the instructor or whoever gives you your question if you're teaching to the grade, so to speak. I don't know if you know this, but 100% of all the Navy batteries for submarines are made within a 300-mile corridor between Warrensburg, Missouri, and Fort Smith, Arkansas. What our aim at AEsir is to displace those batteries with nickel zinc and keep the battery production for the submarines in the state of Missouri. Okay, so how does your organization fit into the broader defense ecosystem regionally and nationally? So regionally, we're also a member of something called MOCAP, which stands for Missouri Center for Advanced Power. Actually, we were a founding member of MOCAP when I was at Eagle Pitcher. We were one of the companies that set it up. But essentially, it's the University of Missouri education system, and it is a group of companies, including NSC and Eagle Pitcher and AEsir, who are in the business of energy. And so that's one of the things we do regionally to help promote battery technology and alternative power. Nationally, of course, I mentioned that we were doing this data center thing in Atlanta, and we're working with the Air Force and the Army and so forth. So it's important to us that we create this network, if you will. What do you perceive as the greatest value the NSC initiative could serve, both specific to your organization as well as the region? I'm most excited about initiatives such as what Dr. Caruso was talking about. About 90% of our material comes from China today. And to be part of the nuclear triad, so to speak, and two arms of the nuclear triad, our customers aren't happy about that. They aren't happy with getting all of our material out of China. So we are actively sourcing material out of the United States. In fact, we have an offtake intent agreement with Doe Run. Chris Novell is in the audience, and we believe that the tailings at Doe Run contain sufficient nickel to outfit the entire submarine fleet with our batteries. So initiatives like what Dr. Caruso was talking about, very important to us. We still might buy foreign nickel for the data center, for the commercial side, and that'll probably come from places like the Philippines, Solomon Islands, and so forth. Australia also has a bunch of nickel. In what specific areas do you see where NSC can amplify your opportunities and fill your needs? Networking for human resources is very important to us. Understanding what services there are to help, both through chambers, through most regional areas have economic and workforce development. What's missing, though, I think, from a small business perspective, is access to capital. The larger businesses, you have an ongoing revenue stream, you have an ongoing operation base to draw from. There's a new initiative in the Defense Department called the Office of Strategic Capital, and they have a program called the SBI CCT. And this is Small Business Initiative Critical Core Technologies. And so they just stood this up recently, and there are 17 companies that are looking at partnering with DoD and the SBA and private equity and providing capital. And so this is something that is sorely needed for small business, but not one of these 17 companies that stood up to be licensed for this program is in the Crossroads area in Missouri or Kansas, not one of them. So this is something where I think that we could use some more assistance. And what can we do to support and elevate the NSC initiative? And I'm going to continue to support MOCAP. We hire a lot of interns. Every summer, we usually bring in 4 or 5 interns. Every year, we do a STEM-related tour of the factory. We do a lot of additive manufacturing for prototyping, and the kids just love that. I mean, we do a lot of tours. We've actually hired one of the children, has graduated from high school, and we hired her to work in the factory, one of the children, one of our employees, after doing this tour. Just a point. I see this whole initiative as really helping to maintain and build out our defense industrial base. And I think this is one of the most important missions that this organization can have. If you look at our chief adversaries, the Chinese have 232 times the shipbuilding capacity of the United States. And we've lost a lot of our capacity over time, and we need to be bringing that back.
Great. Thanks, Rand. Actually, I'm really glad you brought up Office of Strategic Capital. I had that written down here. What's your personal experience then? If you know you might be in a capital situation, why is it? What was the barrier for you to consider using that? You said no one in the NSC used it, or has used it thus far?
Well, no, I'm just saying this region does not have that. None of the licensees for that are in this region yet. Now, they've done the first tranche of licensees in January.
Right.
The second tranche of licensees, their applications are due March 31st, I think.
Okay. All right.
And so they're planning on licensing 100 lenders. And it would be nice if we had, some in the St. Louis, Kansas City region
Gotcha.
who are defense-focused, who would become licensed lenders for that program.
That's absolutely tailor-made for something like NSC to champion something like that. Great. Thanks for elaborating on that. Okay. All right. We have approximately about 10, 12 minutes for some questions. So same rules as the last few panels. Just raise your hand and I will acknowledge you. Put my glasses on so I'll make sure I see you. Right here again. Yes.
Hey, Adam Lauder, NIDS. So one of the big things that is important for workforce development, recruitment, and then retention is to have a narrative, a story that makes people both want to come work for you and then stay, that ties them to that mission. Like for me, I watched Top Gun as a kid, and therefore I went and tried to become a fighter pilot. That was what tied me to that mission. And so I guess my question is, do you guys have a narrative and a story, and is it working? Are you recruiting who you need? Are you retaining people? Do they feel connected to the missions and that they're making a difference for the nation? Can you tell us about that?
You want to start us off? Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's great point. So we were just talking about this as a site. 50% of our mechanic force today has 5 years or less experience. Prior to COVID, we had close to almost half could retire in the next 5 years. So we've had this big turnover, and how do you keep those folks on and engaged? We are going through trying to bring back the mantra of Fighter Town USA. That was an old term that was used for a long time, and then it just kind of dissipated. And so we just had a new logo designed for the site. We just had a new site video produced. We've never had one, so it's got a lot of cool jet scenes of F-15s and afterburner going Viking mode, and so we're showing more of that. To your point, and I think it's a great point to raise, because we are seeing this huge turnover in workforce, and they're just not as familiar with what we do. So yes, to your point, and I could see that being a similar experience just at all our locations.
Yeah, so in Kansas City here, the history goes that we were the washing machine plant. No one knew what we did. You'd go in and come out, your spouse wouldn't know. So we're a little bit better than that, but when you think of your workforce, at least coming out of school right now, they weren't around during the Cold War. I mean, they were maybe not even around for 9/11. They don't know really what an adversary is. Their freedom, it's just assumed. It's not something you have to do. So the concept of even knowing that there's nuclear weapons out there pointed at targets every day and people manning them is not known. And so the nuclear IQ is very low. For us, we're one piece of the pie. We're actually all the little bits and pieces, so we don't have cool things that fly or blow up. We don't have anything radioactive or explosive. So for us, it's kind of back into the basics of STEM. It's not a scary job. We want to get our people out in the community to go understand that you can do a manufacturing job, and it's not like the traditional job where you sit and push a button all day. Anyone can do it. There's different types of skills and processes, and it's very rewarding understanding the mission that we have. If you don't understand, nuclear weapons, nuclear deterrence, okay, we got to help. In a job interview, we just did, do you know what we do here? Tell us what you think, and just make sure. But not everyone knows, and so when I look at even the schools that we're in, my goal is that one of our employees touches every student from K through 12. They know who Honeywell is. They know what we make, and really, it'd be great if they worked there, but I can't promise a job. But I can promise I'm going to be in their backyard their whole time growing up, and maybe they'll go to college. But they're going to actually think about, hey, I got a degree in engineering. I don't know exactly how that happened. Well, maybe we were part of that. And maybe I want to come back home and grow up the way I did, and have a life here in the Midwest, which many people do. Because once you bring people back into the Midwest, it's pretty hard to leave. If you grew up in the Midwest, you don't appreciate it until you leave. And so we do lose and export a lot of talent, but you find that a lot come back. And so if people know who we are and what we do, and we can continue to have all of our employees be advocates for that, that's what we can do with our piece. And obviously it's much bigger when you look at everything that's going on within, you could say, this Crossroads arena.
I'll just add briefly, it's nice being a Honeywell, being a Boeing, to have that rich heritage that goes back, a long time. When I was at Eagle Pitcher, we had a history that goes back 180 years, and a lot of our employees, we would bring in astronauts, and we would bring in airmen, and we would bring in soldiers who had stories about how they used products that contained our batteries and how important they were. We talked about the story of Apollo 13 at Eagle Pitcher. Apollo 13 was brought back on silver zinc batteries made at Eagle Pitcher in Joplin, Missouri. So that heritage, and I have to say, most of my tenured employees, we're only an 8-year-old company, but most of my tenured employees at AEsir followed me over from Eagle Pitcher. So they know these stories, and they have this heritage. Our hourly employees, it's a challenge, and it's one of my main challenges, is to instill that sense of mission in them and give them that story, that backstory. So, we're leveraging a little bit of the history of what we were before and bringing it up to date. But it is an important part of creating a culture.
Listen, let's start with a big round of applause for our final panel here.
Thank you for listening to our coverage of the recent National Security Crossroads event. This wraps up our 5-part series. I hope the discussions you have heard over the course of these episodes have given you an insight into the collaboration that is happening between Missouri and Kansas when it comes to defense, and how that can have an impact on the economy. If you enjoyed this series, we would appreciate a like, comment, or even a share from you. If there are other topics you would like to see us dive into next, then let us know. We'd like to hear from you. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Inside EcoDevo podcast so you can stay up to date on episodes just like this one. Thanks for listening.